Okay, let's see if we're live. As a measure of check, let me see on YouTube if everything works correctly. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, we're all good. We're all live. So, hello everyone, or better said, Ohio everyone. Welcome to today's community call. I'm Robert, a developer advocate at the Starknet Foundation, and I will be your host for today. We're excited to have Terence, the co-founder and CEO of Cartridge and core developer on Dojo, as invited speaker for this session. Our focus for today's discussion is all about Dojo 1.0 and Starknet gaming, where we'll discuss in detail topics such as what is Dojo and its stack, the upcoming release of Dojo 1.0, and how to get involved within the community. For our viewers, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the YouTube chat section or X, and we'll do our best to address them. Welcome, Teres. How is your day? How are you doing? And what have you been up to lately?
Hey, Robert. Thanks for hosting. So far, so good. Early here in New York, we have some fall storms going on, but can't complain. Everything's going well.
Gotcha. Super excited for this session. And I myself currently I'm at ETH Blockchain Berlin. So we're all around the globe. So that's fantastic.
Awesome.
Awesome. So I'll ETH Berlin. It's a good time to be here.
It was one of the first I was there in I think like 2017 or something for the hackathon. It was one of my favorite ones. It's such a cool city. Yeah.
Nice. So good memories from ETH Berlin, I guess.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so we could get started into some of the background and origin stories, and then we could get into more depth of what Dojo 1.0 is. So maybe let's go back to the origins. What is Dojo and what is Cartridge?
Awesome. Yeah, let's hop right into it. So, I mean, kind of the origin goes back to dope wars at the end of the day. Even I think like the kind of origin of this idea of building games on top of Starknet, it was first kind of attempted back then. So about like 2.5 years ago, myself and some others started the dope wars ecosystem shortly after the loot ecosystem was created, with the idea of doing something similar to loot, but more with a kind of GTA kind of theme. And one difference was that the NFTs that were issued and like freely minted by everyone were actually tokens that could control a DAO. And the DAO accrued royalties from secondary market sales from OpenSea. And at the time, it was like the huge NFT boom, and there was a lot of transaction volume. And very shortly, the DAO accumulated a couple $1 million in ETH from just these secondary market sales. And so the DAO was in a position where it had a bunch of money to fund a bunch of different like initiatives. And someone came to the DAO by the name of Karama, like early people in the Starknet ecosystem might remember him, and said like, hey, like I would like to build like a fully on-chain version of this original game Drug Wars, which is what inspired the lore of Dope Wars. Which is essentially like this calculator game, or actually it was an MS-DOS game from, I think it was like 1982, which is an arbitrage game. So quite uniquely positioned or uniquely applicable to like the blockchain technology. It's very similar to what people are doing already with dexes like Uniswap and stuff. And so he came to the DAO and proposed like, hey, I want to build a fully on-chain version of this game called Roll Your Own, and I want to build it on top of Starknet. And Starknet was at the time, I think it was just done the first mainnet release. I forget what it was called back then. It was a really tough development experience. Like there wasn't even events or anything. Like people think Cairo Zero was bad. Like early days of Cairo Zero without even events was like impossible to build applications on top of it. But it was clear that there was a lot of potential here, and that with the technology that the Starkware team was building would enable these type of ambitious use cases that required a lot more computation and were a lot more complex than what was possible at the time on networks like Ethereum that are just significantly more constrained. And so Parama started building out a modular game engine called Roll Your Own that subsequently also inspired Lofu and to bring the Realms ecosystem over to build on top of the Starknet ecosystem. And it was like one of the earliest attempts of building this, and kind of opened all of our eyes to the potential here. There was still a ton of gaps in being able to ship these types of experiences to mainnet and make them easily accessible by players. But the idea of putting a game fully on chain with all the logic in the state and having like this native extensibility and composability and this credible neutrality was a really interesting one. So we, myself and Calvin, spun out of Dope Wars to some extent and started Cartridge to focus on this problem of building fully on-chain games on top of Starknet. This is about 2 years ago now, a little bit over 2 years ago, and we've made a ton of progress since then. And so that's like kind of the origin story of where Cartridge started. Initially, we were focusing more on the user experience side of things, of making these games like easily accessible to users. So we shipped a Cartridge controller 2 years ago that demonstrated passkeys and being able to like very easily onboard users to games. And we had this idea of the arcade that was like surfacing a bunch of the different games. And those ideas are coming back to kind of relevance now. But about a year and a half ago, we shifted gears to focus more on bottoms-up ecosystem building. And so with the advent of Cairo 1.0, and in collaboration with some of the other teams building on top of Starknet, like the Realms team and the Brick team, namely Loaf and Sylv and myself, we started building out the Dojo toolchain for providing essentially like a higher level of abstraction to give developers a lot more leverage and allow them to ship these types of experiences much more easily on top of Starknet, and taking advantage of all these interesting technologies. And so that was about a year and a half ago now. The toolchain has come a really long way. The ecosystem has been built up significantly. We have a bunch of different teams building interesting games on top of it. And it's a really exciting time to be involved in the on-chain gaming autonomous world space today, and building with Dojo and on top of the Cartridge stack. So yeah, that's a kind of a bit of the origin story.
The genesis story, and definitely a lot of challenges throughout the process. And I haven't experienced Starknet early days, but I believe a lot of people such as you, like the early people that joined Starknet, they weren't even like account wallets or something like that. It was very difficult to navigate the whole sea of challenges. But I guess we're here today, and there's a lot of progress that has been made on both Starknet and Dojo. And maybe going into this topic, could you tell me from your perspective, what does Dojo look like today? How many contributors do we have, and full-time studios building on Dojo? And what type of events are even lined up?
Yeah, so the Dojo ecosystem today is really healthy. We have, I would say, around 100 contributors to the toolchain itself that have contributed in different capacities over time, but a really strong core development team, primarily right now driven by the Cartridge team. The toolchain is essentially can enable you to build a game like end to end. So you have a sequencer with Katana, and one of the great things about the Starknet ecosystem is it kind of very early on transitioned to like a modular approach and writing everything in Rust, like a lot of it driven by the Starkware team. So shipping these things has been in like collaboration with the Starknet team, has been enabled by like this modular kind of approach, and allowed us to do it with a pretty small team of talented core contributors and the broader ecosystem contributors. But we have Katana, which is a sequencer, high performance sequencer focused on sequencing for the gaming use case. In particular, we've configured it or enabled it to be configured to support the ZK threads use case, which was announced earlier today by the Starkware team, and something that we've been collaborating with them for a little bit, and we can dig a little bit more into what exactly that looks like maybe later on the call. So you have Katana, which is a sequencer. It also includes like some interesting stuff like we are currently working on integrating a native VRF into it. So different gaming specific use cases, and we have a bunch of other ideas that will be supported natively inside of Katana and really differentiate it and make it well suited for the types of experiences that people want to ship with Dojo. We have Sozo, which is a tool chain for managing your smart contracts and deploying them. So it'll take everything from the actual compilation of a smart contract, outputting the artifacts. It has like a kind of declarative configuration management manifest system that allows you to easily configure different deployments to different chains. It'll automatically take a look at what you have locally and what exists on chain and figure out like the strategy for deploying them, for declaring the classes, at registering the events, and configuring the access control to them. And then we have Tori, which is an automatic indexer. So Dojo, it's like, stepping back a little bit, is a framework, a smart contract framework for defining these worlds. It kind of follows similar to the diamond pattern. It has like this world that is the entry point to everything inside of this Dojo world. So you have, like, for example, Realms World or Dope World, or a lot of different worlds that contains like a bunch of different experiences inside of it. The world contains all of the state of the world and access control for how you interact with it. So like who can write to it and who can read from it. And it also manages all the different smart contracts inside of that ecosystem. So anyone can register a new model. So if you want to, for example, have a character that has like health and like maybe there's some other attributes associated with them, like the name and the manner or something, you can like register a model, and then anyone inside of that world can share that representation. And when you register a model, it incorporates it, like embeds like the schema information into the model, the class itself, and deploys it on chain, and enables something called automatic indexing, which is what we support with Tori. So Tori can look at any world that's deployed on a Katana instance or on Starknet or Sepolia or whatever, and it can automatically generate you a GraphQL and a gRPC interface that provides very low latency, reactive view of the on-chain state. So all the applications like basically use Tori, and then the integrated SDKs that we provide for React and TypeScript and Unity to read like the state of the world. So those are some of the components. There's one other one that we are in the process of developing called Saya, which is responsible for actually like settling Katana instances. So Saya would take like the execution information from Katana, it would generate an execution trace and a state diff, and then it will settle it to some target settlement chain, like Starknet, for example, and can also be configured with different data availability solutions or different settlement targets, and can be configured to operate Katana as like a persistent layer 3 or in this like ZK thread ephemeral kind of rollup construction. I know that's a lot of information. The toolchain itself is really quite expansive, and it's a pleasure to use. Anytime we've seen people kind of dig into the Dojo ecosystem, they've always been like, "Whoa, I'm quite surprised at how much stuff there is here and how great the user experience is." Like being able to kind of get everything up and running very easily and write some smart contracts and build an interface for it like much more rapidly than people have typically been able to in the blockchain space.
Yeah, totally agree. I think the two chains that have been developed on Dojo are amazing, and thanks to Cartridge and Newt and to a lot of other core contributors to Dojo, this made possible. I myself tried to deploy a few games. One was with Bevy on the engine side, and I had a lot of fun developing the game. It was a good experience as a developer. It was seamless, so I didn't have to worry about deploying all my contracts. I use Sozo in this case. Katana, it's a great sequencer that you can use, and I think the overall developer experience is really great. And there's a lot of things that you can build, and yeah, I'm super excited about that. Maybe just to I'm just curious. Is like, how did Dojo came to be, or like the name of the Dojo? What's the story behind it?
The name of the dojo, I think the credit goes to Loaf. Loaf is like a genius namer. Is one of his exceptional skills. He just like he's named a lot of things in the ecosystem. I think he just kind of said like, let's call it Dojo, and we're just like, yeah, that's a great name. Let's call it Dojo. I don't think there wasn't a whole lot of kind of effort spent on it at the time. And then we've kind of gone, yeah, deep off the deep end with the theme with Tori and Katana and Ohio and Saya and origami and
Yeah, I think it became quickly a cult, let's say, but I love this. I love the community and I love the vibes that spread around Dojo. Cool. I think for like going deeper into the topic of Dojo, I believe you guys are preparing for a big launch, and that's Dojo 1.0. Maybe you can talk what are some new additions to the Dojo stack this version brings with this release, and what we can expect.
Yeah, so I mean, I think like the big goal for Dojo 1.0 is just stability. We've done a ton of like iteration and improvement of the toolchain and introduced like, a lot of breaking changes over the time, and really appreciate everyone in the ecosystem, both like contributing to helping like identify issues as we've shipped things, and also just like kind of dealing with this rapid pace of changes. But I feel like we've finally settled on an architecture that is something that we can like commit to long term. A lot of the pieces that will be a part of Dojo 1.0 are already inside of the stack. So it's really just like a target for stability. One of the big ones that's kind of being wrapped up right now is support for different storage layouts. We have with Dojo, we have things like automatic bit packing, and we also want to enable. So you have this like the storage of the world, which is like this Dojo store, and you have the schema introspection. Like so, when you define a struct inside of Cairo, it like encodes it in a way that it becomes like introspectable on chain, and it also tries to optimally pack that representation on chain. And there's a bunch of different details involved in that, and it had some kind of limitations on the types of models that you could define and that were compatible with the full toolchain end to end. And because a lot of them were defined before, like things like strings and stuff like that existed inside of the Cairo toolchain. And so Pierre or Glim and Nassar have been working really hard, and another contributor, Remy, on defining like a more generalized storage layout mechanism that's going to basically support all Cairo types. So that's going to be an exciting thing that will land in 1.0 and enable, one of the big things that people want to just store, like an array, for example, or a span in storage, which isn't possible today, is going to be easily possible with this new architecture. The SOZA manifest landed in 060, which I think is actually a really massive, and that was led by 0x Lambda, a really massive improvement to how you manage and deploy contracts to different chains and kind of that whole life cycle. So that will be in 1.0. We haven't really like announced that. On Katana side of things, I think like one thing that might make it in is we're working with Rye Labs on the native VRF implementation that uses Cairo hints. So basically allows you to very efficiently provide like actual randomness or verifiable randomness inside of the execution of games on top of Katana, something that wasn't possible previously, and most people were just using like something like block hashes. And so this is just a much more robust solution to that. And then, it really just is the goal is feature completeness. So we have like a bunch of different SDKs that we maintain, and making sure those are all compatible with all these different changes. Oh, and then the big ones are language server support. So we've had Dojo was a very early adopter of kind of the Cairo compilation pipeline, like plugin system, and the ability to add macros, like similar to Rust. So a lot of the things that you do inside of Dojo use, like for example, the get and set macro. And we have like our own Dojo contract and Dojo interface, which provides like a higher level of abstraction, more around like the particular like opinions of the framework. That has created some challenges with integrations with the language servers who have been working with the Scarb team to support that inside of Scarb, as well as we're hoping that we can support writing tests with Starknet Foundry. So right now we just use the native Cairo test runner, and Foundry is going to be a huge unlock in that regard as well. So generally 1.0 is just going to be much more stable. It's going to be feature complete, and it's going to be something that like developers can feel comfortable committing a lot more resources and building complex things without having to kind of worry about breaking changes or having to like refactor things in the future.
Well, that's a lot of things to unpack, but definitely excited for this new feature. Stability is definitely important, but yeah, I think I'm looking forward to the log of the release and then to see how like, we can use this for our day-to-day development or on-chain gaming. Cool. So I think we briefly touched upon the ZK threads and Saya.
Mhm.
And just to give like an overview for the public, I believe today a new design piece was published by Starknet and in collaboration with Cartridge. You worked on ZK threads. So could
Mhm.
you briefly talk about what ZK threads are? And then we could go into the Saya part.
Yeah, so I think like so ZK threads is like basically this idea of essentially like sharding the execution of Starknet is how I conceptually think about it, and it's something that we've been working on for a while now, and have been collaborating with Louis, who's been leading the effort on the Starkware side of things, to kind of define what this looks like, what we support today, and basically it's like end to end, and we're planning to post a video of it, like the whole pipeline, maybe later today on Twitter, and you can kind of take a look at it. But what it basically supports is taking some underlying settlement layer like Starknet, forking it, and incorporating like all of the state into some like new, dedicated execution environment. So start with Katana, and this is something that we support with Slot on top of with Cartridge. So Slot is like the execution layer for the Dojo ecosystem, or is like that lives on top of Starknet. And you can basically spin up a Katana instance that forks the underlying Starknet network and all of its state. So you have access to all the accounts and the storage and the smart contracts that already live there. So you may have a world that's already deployed to Starknet, and gives you a Katana instance that's like, for example, geographically close to a user, so has very low latency and has like a dedicated machine. So you have like a lot of throughput. And inside of that instance, you can play, for example, a round of a multiplayer game. Like it works particularly well for like session-based things, or kind of this idea of ephemeral rollups. Like we want to provision some dedicated computation capacity just for like this short duration of time. And it enables like a new set of affordances. Like one of the key ones, and one of the biggest challenges with scaling computation on blockchains, is this limitation around state bloat, right? Like blockchains store all of the state, or at least like depending on the node that you're operating. But in Starknet's case, for example, or most rollups case, like you have to store all of the state of the entire rollup. And so if you have a very stateful, expensive experience, you end up having to pay a lot for storing all that state, because it needs to basically be like persisted for a very long period of time. With the ephemeral rollup, you get this like dedicated execution environment, low latency, and without like the noisy neighbor problem. But you also get access to essentially like infinite like free state, so you can have these very stateful experiences. And you can implement, for example, like in the context of Dojo, like a dungeon run. Like if you are, have played World of Warcraft or something, like you go into a dungeon with some of your friends, and you have like some initialization state, which is like the items that people have and stuff like that going into the dungeon. You do the dungeon run, and it's a bunch of computation. There's a lot of stuff happening, like a lot of like it's like a highly interactive event. And then you reach the end of it, and essentially you have like some finalization state that says like, oh, like we killed all the mobs, and like these are the players that were in it, and this is like the outcome of it. And everything in between, like because of the properties of like zero knowledge proofs, you don't really necessarily care about like persisting for all time, right? And so you have this like really nice property with ZK threads, where you can compress all of that just into the initialization state and the output state, and generate a proof attesting to everything in between. So you can very cheaply bring these like very stateful, computationally complex experiences on chain, without competing with other people for like those resources, and making it like much cheaper to implement and do the execution, and then just settle it directly back into the state of the settlement chain. So instead of having like a roll up today where you have like a lot of bridging like overhead and stuff like that. You need to like maybe create new accounts, you need to bridge funds, you need to like worry about this whole like new logically like separate world. In this case, like it's like a logically like unified experience on top of Starknet. And when it settles back into the chain, it just modifies that state directly. So like you know your balances and the items that you have and all those kind of things are just reflected directly on Starknet. Um, as if like that execution actually happened on Starknet directly, rather than having to like worry about like bridging them back over some canonical bridge or something. Is that does that
Got
make
it.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I know like I've been discussing with you about this and you've been working tremendously on this, so I'm super excited that this is happening. And I guess you already been working on Saya, it's called, and this has to play with Katana. So maybe we could talk about this a little bit and what does it bring to the Dojo stack in general?
Yeah, so Saya is basically like our proving service. And so what Saya does is, so they with ZK rollups is a few different steps to like the life cycle of like an execution, right? Like there's like the actual just like execution of it, which is a sequencer usually performs, and there's like a native execution of some like function or some smart contract that is relatively fast to do with something like the Cairo VM, and really fast to do with something like Cairo native, and that allows your sequencer to support like like a high TPS, for example. Then you have like this second process that can be done and asynchronously from the sequencing itself, which is to generate an execution trace and a state diff, which is basically running the same logic in like prover mode is what it's called inside of the Cairo VM. And this is like much more computationally expensive relative to just like the like native computation of the smart contract. So the first execution is basically convince the sequencer that it can generate the execution trace and the state diff. Then Saya pulls that execution information from the sequencer and generates the actual the execution trace and the state diff. And this can be parallelized across your transactions. And then the third step is to actually generate the proof of it. And so Saya will submit the execution trace and the state diff to a proving service like Sharp, or you can run Stone, or those are the two that we support today. And then the proving service responds with the proof, and then you have to like actually settle the proof. So you have some target verifier that could be the Stark verifier on L1 on Ethereum in Solidity or any like EVM chain, or it could be like the Herodotus verifier that they've developed for Starknet, and you can verify your proofs on top of Starknet, and Saya will take care of that process as well. So it sits between like essentially like the sequencer, the proving service, and the settlement layer, and coordinates like kind of this dance of like, okay, we have this computation and we want to bring it on chain. Like, let's do all the things that are necessary to do that.
Yeah, I think I've already seen some of the tests happening with the Cairo verifier, and I think they call it now integrity. So yeah, I'm super excited to see this could bring to the Dojo stack. Awesome. So yeah, if our viewers have any questions, feel free to drop them, and we can address them here. But let's take a step back from the technology world, and let's go into the ecosystem and what's currently happening in the ecosystem. Now, I've been in the Dojo community for a while now, and I've played some of the games, and I've had a lot of fun with these games. But maybe you can tell us in the pipe what can we expect as gamers.
Yeah, so as gamers, I mean, there's a lot of exciting developments where, as people I think kind of know, like games traditionally require relatively more resources to bring to market because there's so many different domains that are required around, like the game design, the smart contract development, the client design, the UI assets and the models and all the audio design. So it's been a little bit there's been a ton of work happening in the background, and we're currently very close to very exciting, I think, period in time where a lot of these teams are starting to ship games into production. So I know of two that are in Sepolia right now, and a bunch more that are, at least from just the Dojo ecosystem, that are scheduled to be shipped onto Sepolia and then mainnet like shortly thereafter. We have about 15 full-time studios now building different Dojo games. The roll your own game that we're developing internally at Cartridge for the Dope Wars ecosystem, we plan to ship to mainnet. I think it's probably going to be around like first or second week of June. We'll be on Starknet mainnet, and I know the Paved game, which is like a on-chain Carcassonne inside of the Realms ecosystem, is planning to be in production soon as well. We also have a bunch of other cool games that are being developed, like Loot Survivor 2. So that team is building the next iteration of Loot Survivor, which was one of the earliest games to deploy to Starknet mainnet, and they're building that one on top of Dojo. And I think like from what I've seen, it's going to be really cool. There's the Force Prime team that has been pushing out, like consistently shipping a really cool experience, a really cool game that you can start playtesting today. Z Conqueror. Yeah, and there's a few other ones that I'm definitely forgetting, like the Warpack game is one that was shipped recently is quite interesting. I think that one's on Sepolia too. And Starkane, it's a team of really talented developers that are building like a fully on-chain kind of RTS MMORPG style game. That's really interesting. And then there's outside of that, like a bunch of events and stuff that we can talk about as well, for opportunities for people to kind of get more involved and maybe start building their own games on top of the Dojo stack, on top of Starknet as well.
Got it. I think Kalk was saying pistols. We forgot pistols.
Oh, pistols. Yeah, pistols. Yeah, there's too many. I should have written them all down.
Definitely, definitely. Like,
yeah,
the ecosystem has a lot of games. I think Paved and Force Prime, which are also notably mentioned. But yeah, excited for these type of games, and I think I've been playing most of them. I had fun with Roll Your Own, the first generation of Loot Survivor, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the releases and just play them as a gamer.
awesome.
We have a question from Arnold. Although, so he's asking about a certain blog post of Poldinia, who doesn't believe in blockchain gaming because, according to him, gamers hate when there's a financial stake in the game. So, what do you think about that? Like, have you ever read the blog post, or maybe we can?
I don't recall. I mean, I think like it's a very broad statement. I don't think like blockchain games inherently need to be financialized. I think like, the fundamental affordance that we're trying to bring to gaming is to essentially provide, this idea of autonomous worlds, or these like, fully permissionless, extensible, composable worlds that can live forever. And I think like one practical outcome of that is that you have much better stakeholder alignment from the players in an ecosystem with the people that are developing it, the game or building on top of it. You create this idea, this possibility for other teams to build new experiences on top of like this kind of underlying shared substrate without the associated platform risk that typically happens with a publisher model, right? Like if you look at a lot of the successful games that exist today, if you build an experience on top of it, you're kind of like have some ceiling in how successful that experience can be, because like the publisher is first of all going to take like a significant, or the studio behind it is going to take like a significant amount, is going to take some significant cut of any revenues if they even enable you to create revenues. And in a lot of cases, when you see people building on top of existing gaming ecosystems, if they have like a successful mod, for example, they just incorporate it as a first party thing, and essentially like you can't capture any of that value. So this is a very weak incentive for people to kind of experiment and build on top of these existing ecosystems, and that platform risk is kind of removed by using, kind of inheriting the affordances of a blockchain. And you also create these worlds that can live forever, right? Like can outlive like the creators of them, and can live on like a multi-generational timeline. The players have much stronger guarantees around like how that universe is going to evolve. We've seen a lot of challenges in existing gaming ecosystems where essentially like a game publisher's incentive is to basically extract value from the audience, and so they make changes that players, or kind of like dilute the time and that people have committed to building out their characters or accumulating items and stuff like that. And I think like it's a fundamentally different approach that doesn't necessarily need to be financialized. So I disagree that. I mean, I think like the kind of Web 2.5 approach of just focusing on hyper financialization was very poorly received by gamers. But I think there's like a much more interesting value proposition that fully on-chain games brings to the table, that I think will resonate with a lot of the gaming ecosystem, and we're already seeing that.
Thank you for the answer. And yeah, I think right now, like it's just moving forward to another topic now. It's super sunny outside, so the weather is getting better, and I guess you also are preparing, or the Dojo community is preparing for the upcoming summer, and I guess you guys have a few things lined up. So maybe we can talk like what type of events are you guys cooking, or like the Dojo community is cooking and programs, and like we could go through a little bit of that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a lot of exciting stuff happening over the next few months. I could talk on the product side of things, like we have Dojo 1.0, but then from Cartridge, where we're building a lot of the auxiliary tooling and infrastructure around the Dojo ecosystem that allows people to take a game from something they're developing locally and ship it into production. We have like the controller that we're going to reintroduce, is a product that we had from 2 years ago that just makes it really easy for people to onboard onto these games. And so that will be something that we're shipping next month. Slot, which is like kind of like this execution layer that supports ZK threads and allows people to very quickly spin up Katana and Tori instances. That is going to support a production settlement in a couple months as well, like sometime this summer. And then we have worlds.dev, which is kind of when we were talking about all the different games, and how it's becoming hard to remember them all. Worlds.dev is like a kind of like a distribution platform for all of these on-chain games. You can kind of go there today. It's mostly focused on development right now, but something that will be more and more positioned towards the player as like the ecosystem matures. And then we also have like a bunch of other initiatives that we're running outside of just like the core ecosystem. So we have outside of like the product roadmap itself. The Starknet Fellowship Dojo track kicks off today. I know a lot of people are participating in that. I think Loaf is going to be leading that. We have the Starknet Base Camp cohort Dojo workshop on the May 30th. We have the Dojo track that we're sponsoring in collaboration with the Lambda team at ETH CC this year. So that's going to be in July. If people are interested in participating in that, we're going to share more information on that shortly on Twitter, so you can apply for that. We have the Cartridge Sensei Fellowship. If you're interested in working with us more closely on building your games, like currently like the Provable Games or Loot Hero and the Loot Survivor team are collaborating with us in this capacity. And we have a few other teams that we potentially will do this in the future, which is just like the ability to work very closely with Cartridge and leverage a lot of our resources to help you ship games. So we have the Sensei Fellowship that you can apply for. We have the Cartridge Developer Partnership Program, which is for more studio or teams building, and creates like a closer relationship so we can support them as they develop on top of Dojo and deploy their games to production. And then we have the residency program that we're kicking off this August, September, which is going to be, I think, really exciting. Which is going to be 8 weeks in New York City from August, I think, 5th to like September 27th, I think are the dates, where we're bringing 30 builders or creatives in the on-chain gaming autonomous world space to New York City to hack on and explore like a bunch of different ideas and kind of push the frontiers of what's possible with the technology stack that we're developing. And we still have a few slots available there, and we're still actively inviting new participants. So if any of the viewers are interested in joining that, thinking about how can you apply, kind of interesting cryptographic approaches to support like hidden information, for example, in games, or new approaches to building on-chain games and lore, and exploring different game mechanics, or building, like net new autonomous worlds and new IP on top of the stack. I think it's going to be a really awesome opportunity to kind of kickstart that and get involved in the ecosystem. So yeah, like it's going to be a pretty jam-packed summer, I think, with a lot of exciting events and developments in the ecosystem.
Definitely exciting things happening, and maybe for our viewers, where could they potentially get more information about this? Would be the Twitter or the website?
Yeah, I think the best place is probably Twitter. I know it's all on Twitter. So there's cartridge underscore GG is the cartridge Twitter. And then there's Ohio, OHAYO underscore Dojo, which is the Dojo Twitter. So you can check out both of those feeds. The residency program that we're hosting in New York City is currently the pinned one on the Dojo feed. And then the other information is contained in there somewhere. We'll do a better job of surfacing this in the future. Or just feel free to hop into the Dojo Telegram or the Discord server and ping me or anyone else from the ecosystem, and we're happy to point you in the right direction.
Yeah, I've dropped some links in the chat. So for those on YouTube, I think you guys have access to. So I dropped the Twitter, and then the rest of the socials you can find on the Dojo Engine website, and then you can join the Discord and the Telegram channel, and then you can ask more questions about the programs that the Dojo community and Cartridge are hosting. And if you want to get involved, I think that's the best way to start with getting yourself involved with the community and start building things, right? I believe we're quickly reaching an end of the community call. Maybe if you have any closing remarks for our viewers that you would like to say.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I mean, I think it's just a really exciting time to get involved in this space. I think the developments in the on-chain gaming space and the autonomous world space are, I think, uniquely positioned to take advantage of a lot of the interesting technological advances that we have in the blockchain space, like this massive over provisioning of computation and data availability that exists now, but also the ability to apply a lot of the new ZK research for hidden information or privacy into games and explore different kind of game mechanics that weren't previously possible. The space is growing very rapidly, but there's a very kind of open ecosystem around it. It's very easy to get involved right now. It's I think very dedicated and passionate group of builders that are excited to collaborate with other people. So if anyone is interested in it, they should definitely dive in. Again, hop in the Discord or join Telegram. I think we're also going to host the Game Jam in June, which is a lot of almost every game jam we've spun out like a full-time studio building now on top of the Dojo ecosystem. So that's a great opportunity to kind of kickstart your career there. I know there's a bunch of resources that are available through the Starknet Foundation or through Cartridge that we can help with, and a lot of other exciting events. So I think I would just like to leave the audience with join us. I think it's going to be it's a fun place to be.
And I couldn't agree more. I think Dojo is a nice community, and make sure to say Ohio instead of GM. But overall, I think there are a lot of talented builders and developers and game designers. So yeah, make sure to join the Discord, join the programs, and start building.
Awesome.
Thank you, Terence. Thank you for being here. It was an enjoyable discussion with you, and I've learned a lot of things from our conversation. Super excited for what you guys building, and looking forward to Dojo 1.0, Saya, ZK threads, and the possibilities of Dojo. To our viewers, thank you again for joining and tuning in for the 56th community call, and I'm wishing everybody a fantastic day. Thank you,
Awesome.
everyone.
Thanks for hosting, and thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Thank you.